Hello, you're welcome to today's session. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Can you indicate in the chat box the country you are joining from? Indicate in the chat box the country you are joining from. I'd like to know the country you are joining from. Please indicate in the chat box the country you are joining from Nigeria, from India, from Canada. Okay, good. Thank you, Brunei. Please indicate the country you are joining from before we start. We're going to start in the next few minutes. Thank you for joining. It's my pleasure to welcome you to my YouTube channel. If this is the first time you are joining me on a channel like this, I say a big thank you. Thank you. So if you are just joining us, please kindly indicate the country you are joining us from. Kindly indicate. We are going to start in the next 1 minute. So if you can hear me loud and clear, can you just indicate in the chat box if you can hear me loud and clear before we go straight to the business of the day. Indrajit, can you hear me? Can you just indicate in your chat box if you can hear me? Okay, thank you. So the audio is okay, so we can start, right? My name is Engineer Olusegun Rotimi Gabriel, and I specially welcome you to my YouTube channel. Now, if this is the first time you are joining me on this channel, basically what we do on the channel is that we make technical education available for everybody, for every engineer. Now, we specialize on different equipment, ranging from rotating equipment. We take different topics, considering detail engineering perspective. So we look at different equipment, such rotating equipment, such as pumps, such as compressors, such as steam turbines, gas turbine, and we critically look at this equipment from detailed engineering experience. Now, same way we do for static equipment, we do a comprehensive, a detailed mechanical design. We teach ourselves about mechanical designs of static equipment, ranging from pressure vessels, ranging from columns, ranging from storage tanks, and so many others, heat exchangers, and so many other static equipment. So if this is the first time you are coming across my channel, so please, we are currently running pump series, centrifugal pump series, and in the next few weeks we are going to be done on centrifugal pump series, and we'll move back to compressor. And all this equipment, we look at it from detailed engineering perspective, and I promise you it's a channel that you will always look out for our next video. So if this is the very first time that you are joining me on this channel, please, I will advise you check below this channel and click the subscribe button. Click the subscribe button below so that you can always get notification. Whenever we upload our videos. And I will also implore you to share our YouTube channel, to share this session with your friends on different professional networks, such as your LinkedIn, such as on your status. Okay, so please click the subscribe button and check through my channel for some of the topics we've covered in the past. Last week we spoke extensively on technical bid evaluation techniques for rotating equipment, and we look at case studies of centrifugal pump. So today we want to look at understanding API 617 compressor datasheet specification. Understanding API 617 Compressor Datasheet Specification. And I promise you, you are going to enjoy the session. So without wasting time, we are going to move straight to what we have under understanding API 617 Compressor Datasheet. You know, in oil and gas applications, centrifugal compressors, you know, generally which is one of the type of compressors. Centrifugal compressors design, manufacturing, and testing are usually in accordance with what? They are usually in accordance with API standards. API standard, API is the American Petroleum Institute. Same way you have API 610 for centrifugal pump. That's the same way you have centrifugal compressor trains being designed, being manufactured, and tested in accordance with API standards, which is the American Petroleum Institute standard. So these are the various basic design standards that you need to be familiar with as far as centrifugal compressor is concerned. You know, for axial and centrifugal compressors, same way expander compressors for petroleum, chemical, and gas industry service. The basic design standard for that is API 617. Same way you have API 614 for the lubrication, for the control oil systems, and various other auxiliary systems such as steam systems and all that. So shaft sealing is also covered under what? Under API 614. Now the same way you have for the machine monitoring systems such as vibration monitoring, axial positioning, you know, bearing monitoring systems being governed by what? By API 670. So as a machinery engineer, as a process engineer, you need to be conversant, you need to be very familiar with some of these design standards. And it's not just for you to know the standards offhand, you need to be able to interpret this standard, you know, with respect to the specific projects that you are working on. So these are just for the introduction of what we have for today. So these are the basic design standards as far as centrifugal compressors are concerned. So for the business of today, we want to look at the compressor data sheet. We want to look at some of the information that needs to be on API 617 compressor data sheet. So whether you are a purchaser, whether you are on the side of the purchaser or you are on the side of the vendor, you need to be able to understand what is required of you as a purchaser and the data required of you to be filled in the compressor data sheet as a purchaser. Now, same way as the vendor, if you are on the vendor side, what are the data required of you to be provided on the compressor data sheet? So we are going to look at the API 617, you know, compressor data sheet as a whole, and look at some of the information that you will look out for, you know, when a vendor submits a bid and before you carry out technical bid evaluation. These are some of the things that needs to be on the data sheet for you to be able to do a detailed technical evaluation of the respective vendors in front of you. You know, you don't want to be the engineer responsible for installing, you know, frequent breakdown machine in your plant. So to be able to do a detailed engineering analysis, you have to understand what is expected of me as a purchaser, my team, either from the process department, either from the mechanical department. When I say mechanical department now, I mean machinery engineers. What are the things that you will look out for when you receive API 617 compressor data sheets from any given compressor vendors, right? So the compressor data sheets, basically, for those of you that are new in the industry, you know, they are meant to contain all the information necessary for the design of the compressor itself. and its main components. Not just the compressor itself, the main components such as the rotor and several other components, couplings, bearings, and the rest. Now, some of the data available on the data sheets are usually defined. Okay, it has to be defined by the purchaser. Some of the data you see, for those of you that have seen API 617 compressor data sheet, you will see that we are going to see a typical compressor data sheet in the course of this today's session. You will see that the data sheets contain a lot of information. Some information, some data will be filled by the vendor, while some data will be filled by the purchaser. So we are going to look at some of these data one after the other for you to understand, because you have data to be stated by the purchaser and you also have data to be stated by the manufacturer. And any data stated by the manufacturer is of course subject to the what? The purchaser technical analysis. So if you don't know what you are expecting or what is expected of the vendor to be submitted to you as a purchaser, how will you do a detailed technical analysis of whatever data sheets the respective vendors have submitted to you? So that is why I have taken it upon myself today to share with you some of this relevant information that must be provided on the compressor data sheet, whether you are on the side of the purchaser or you are on the side of the vendor. So the specification and selection of a centrifugal compressor and various other components of the entire unit is mainly driven, very important, by the equipment data sheets. And this equipment data sheet must be properly filled up first by the purchaser. So there are sections that you as a purchaser must fill. Now, and the vendor, there are sections that the vendor too thereafter must fill. So likewise, you prepare supply specification. Supply specification is also prepared by the purchaser with the aim to detail the overall requirements, with the aim to detail the what? Overall requirements that regulate the whole scope of supply. Don't forget, like I said, the aim of today's session is to guide you, whether you are a process engineer, whether you are a mechanical engineer, whether as an instrumentation engineer. So the aim of today's session is to guide the respective engineers filling this specification with the key information relevant to what? Relevant to the specific equipment that we are talking about for today. So if this is your first time, I'll say again, please check the subscribe button and click the subscribe button below, and don't forget to press the bell button so that you can always get notification whenever we upload videos on various other equipment. Now for today, I'm going to move straight to what we have. Now when you say this centrifugal compressor equipment data sheet, it is possible that you have not seen centrifugal compressor data sheet before. So I'm going to share one with you, and we are going to be looking at it one after the other. All right. So like you can see from my screen, this is a typical centrifugal compressor data sheet. Centrifugal compressor data sheets. Now you will see a lot of data provided on the data sheet. Now before the equipment will be supplied to your plant, you need to do what? A detailed technical evaluation of these data sheets. So if you don't know what is expected of you, how will you do a technical detailed engineering of the data sheet for you to be able to select the right vendor for the given equipment? So today we are going to be looking at different sections on on the data sheet, and about 24 points on this compressor data sheet, on this centrifugal compressor data sheet will be discussed. So the first point I would like to discuss is, now point one, I say point one. If you look at this section, you see general information. Can you see general information? Information about the type of project. Now, if it is say Indian Oil Corporation Limited projects, now you state the projects there. Now the owner, who is the owner? Is it Bharat Petroleum Company? Is it Shell? Now the purchaser, who is the purchaser? Right? Who is the purchaser? It must be stated. So these are general information. The very first section of the data sheet that you are going to see. So this data sheet, this section of the data sheet, this general information of the data sheet has to be filled up. Don't forget, has to be what? Has to be filled up mainly by the process department. So this general information has to be what? Has to be filled up mainly by the process department. So now if you are, of course, on the purchaser side, on a particular project, you are going to have different departments. You have process department, then you have the machinery department, and at the same time you have the instrumentation department and electrical and civil, including piping. So this section of the centrifugal compressor data sheet, has to be filled up mainly by process department with all process data. Very important. With all process data necessary to design the compressor, because this is the beginning of the job. This is the beginning of the task. So it is your responsibility to tell us the general information, such as the project, the owner, the purchaser, the item number, the number of units. You have to state the number of units, the service. Now, like in this case, we said heat pump compressor. Now, the driver, you see, applicable to what? Is it applicable to proposal? Applicable to purchase? Is it applicable to as built? So this general information must be provided by the process department. Now, another point that you need to also take note when you see a compressor API 617 compressor data sheet is the number of units. Okay, the process data must refer to a single machine. You cannot use one centrifugal compressor data sheet for 2 or 3 different compressors in your plant. The process data sheet must refer to what? A single machine only. So you cannot use this particular compressor data sheet now for another compressor that is meant to be supplied to your plant. So that is another thing you need to take note when you are doing, a detailed engineering or doing the basic engineering of a particular project. You don't use one equipment data sheet. You don't use one API 617 centrifugal compressor data sheet for another compressor. No. Each stated operating point shall be clearly, like you see in this case, each stated operating point. I believe you can see my screen. Now, in this case, you see different operating conditions. You see operating condition. You see the normal operating condition stated. You see the rated operating condition stated. Now, each stated operating points shall be clearly identified, and it has to be named, like you see in this data sheet. Now, information like what type of gas the compressor will be handling, what is the weight flow? What is the flow rate? Now, what is the properties of the inlet conditions of the gas that the compressor will be handling? So this information must be clearly stated on the equipment data sheet. If this information is not stated on the data sheet, you as the machinery engineer that is meant to do a technical review of the vendor's documents, you need to comment on the data sheet and state, please furnish the following information, and the vendor will definitely reply. If it does not reply, that means you can't go with such vendor. Okay, so now you need to take note of that. And at the same time, is you see some of the process data, you can see operating conditions listed. So the process guys, the process department must have indicated on the data sheet this information. Now, what are the inlet conditions? The inlet conditions for the compressor must be stated by the process department. Okay, so you have the inlet pressure, you have the inlet temperature for different operating conditions. For different operating conditions. So some of these process data, such as your CPCVs, the specific heat at constant pressure, specific heat at constant volume, and the compressibility factor, must have been stated. So they are indicated by what? By the process department. But, they can be modified anyway by the manufacturer due to a different gas state equation use. But I need to state this: for compressor performance guarantees, manufacturer data should govern. So you must have this information. I have seen some compressors data sheets where detailed information required for the machinery engineer to be able to do a thorough technical evaluation of such data sheet. I've seen cases where the information will not be provided by the vendor. And if you, as the machinery engineer on the purchaser side, you don't know what is expected of you, you will see that the equipment will be supplied to you at the way the vendor pleases. And that will not be good enough. So that is why it is very, very important for you to check some of this information. You have to check some of this information, that are provided. You see information such as the discharge conditions. What are the discharge conditions? The pressure, the discharge pressure, the discharge temperature, the compressibility factor. And at the same time, what is the performance? What is the performance? The vendor needs to tell you what is the BKW required for the gas power. And from your side as the machinery engineer, you also need to do your own detailed calculation. How do you estimate centrifugal compressor BKW with the given operating conditions for different conditions? How do you estimate? How do you calculate the shaft BKW, the gas power? In the next few weeks, I'm going to upload a session on how to calculate this gas powered BKW for centrifugal compressors. I found out that a lot of machinery engineers don't know how to calculate that. You just see the information provided for you either by the vendor or by just the driver manufacturer. So it is expected of you, either as a machinery engineer or the process engineer, to be able to estimate, to be able to determine what is the BKW, what is the performance of this centrifugal compressor, this particular vendor, because these are some of the criteria that you will need to make use of by the time you are doing technical bid evaluation of different vendors. Now, what is the mechanical and seal losses? How do you do this? So that's another question in which in the course, by the time we start compressor series, I am going to, take this data one after the other, how to do these detailed calculations, so that when you see, API 617 compressor datasheet, you can confidently, calculate the BKW and check with respect to what the vendor has given to you, has submitted to you on the data sheets. What is the speed? These are the information that you will check for. Now, what is the polytropic head? These are the things, these are performance, these are indicators for you to select the right vendor. These are the indicators that you will need by the time you are doing technical bid evaluation of different vendors. Let's say you have 10 vendors that have submitted their bid and you need to select just one. So you need to check for the performance of the performance of their equipment based on the operating conditions that you have supplied to the different vendors. So if you don't know how to calculate this, if you don't know how to check this information, if you don't know how to check this data, then how can you do a detailed review? So that is why on this channel, I have taken it upon myself to take up some of this critical information, some of this important data, and how to do a detailed calculations. My channel is not just talking about what is compressor or different types of compressor. We look at this equipment, either pumps, either compressor, steam turbine. We look at it from detailed engineering perspective. How you do thorough technical evaluation of different data submitted by different vendors in order for you to be able to do what? To select the best vendor out of the many that you have in front of you. So that is one of the skills I look out for any mechanical engineer, any process engineer, that will be handling technical bid evaluation. But if you don't know how to do this detailed calculation, then how do you check? Now, you look at the polytropic efficiency, the effect of the polytropic efficiency on your BKW. How do you do all that? So, but for the purpose of today's session, these are very, very important information. So to look out for when you see API 617 compressor data sheet. How to do these thorough calculations, you will see it in my other videos that I'm going to upload on this channel. So if this is your first time, please, or you have been on this channel, you are yet to subscribe, please subscribe today. Just take a few seconds as you are listening to me to subscribe, and don't forget to also click the bell button so that you can always get notification. Now, another thing that you also need to be on the lookout for is that a unique certified point. You can see, you see these certified or guarantee points, such as what you have here, the points that are marked here. You see, these are the rated conditions. Like I said, you have normal operating conditions that will be stated. Then you also have rated. Now, if you have design conditions to it, different operating conditions must be stated on what? On the API 617 compressor data sheet. So another thing that you will have to look out for is that unique or the guarantee points, which has to be stated by the process department. So you can see this marked X. So it has been stated. All right. Now, another section of the API 6.1 compressor data sheet, when you receive compressor data sheet and you are looking for data, these are some of the important data that you will later make use of when you are doing technical evaluation of the equipment, of the data sheet. Now, another thing that you need to be on the lookout for is that the machinery engineer, either as mechanical, as rotating equipment engineer, is that you have to check when you receive API 617 compressor data sheet, you have to check that method of control has been specified on the data sheet. Now, you look at the process control method. This is another point. another area that so many people also ignore. When a vendor submits this document, and if care is not taken, the equipment will be supplied to you without a proper, control method. You need to be very, very familiar with the control method, that has been specified. So you have to check that the method of control has been specified on the equipment data sheet. Like you see in this case, the process control method. You see the area, the box marked black with this black ink indicates the process control method that will be coming with this particular compressor. Now you can see the speed variation. Now what is the speed variation? According to this vendor, is saying from 80% to 105%. That means the capacity control range can be from 80% to 105%. Now, not only do you have speed variation as the process control method for this compressor, now you have bypass through anti-surge valves. And then you look, what is the signal source? What is the signal source? They say suction pressure and the manual. So these are some of the information. So you have to be familiar with it. All right. And so when you receive the equipment P&ID, the piping instrumentation diagram, which shows a detailed piping and instrumentation arrangement of the equipment, then you check what is the process control method that has been put. Now, is it the same control method that was stated in the equipment data sheet? Is that what you have on the P&ID? If that is not what you have on the P&ID, then you have to comment on the P&ID for the vendor, to incorporate into the P&ID or furnish on the P&ID as defined either in your equipment specification, supply specification. So you can see the process control method has been specified on this data sheet. So if the process control method is not specified, you have to comment on the data sheet. Please furnish the process control method. Now the bypass, you also have bypass anti-surge valve. What is the source? Is it suction pressure? Now you can see suction pressure. Now, what is the type of the signal? Electronic signal. If it is pneumatic, the vendor needs to indicate so that you need to know the anti-surge bypass. Is it manual? Is it automatic? Is it none? These are some of the things that must be stated by the vendor on API 617 compressor data sheets. So when you receive this data sheet, these are the areas that you check. These are the areas that you first look out for the data. Is it provided? Now, if you have 10 vendors, you check through all the 10 vendors. Is it all the data? Are they properly filled? You see, just like I mentioned, the data sheet has to be filled properly. Because if it is not filled properly, it's going to affect, other subsequent documents that will be supplied to you. And you need to, the equipment data sheet is the first point of contact that we have with the vendor concerning the equipment you are about to purchase. So it is expected of you, either as process engineer, to get familiar with all this data. All right. Now, another point that I'm also going to state here is that, you will see gas compositions. What type of process gas will your equipment be handling? What type of process gas the compressor will be handling? So you will see the gas composition, just like what you have here. You have ethylene, 0.01 for normal or rated condition, normal 2A or rated 2A. Different projects have different operating conditions. You see normal 6A or turned down. You see 100% propane, 100% propylene. You can see for different operating points, you see different gas compositions stated. Now, ethylene, what value of ethylene is present in the gas that the compressor is going to handle? What value of ethane is present? What is the composition of propylene? This information must also be what? Must be stated. All right. So the gas composition, stated by, and then the next question is who need to state the gas composition on the data sheet? It is the responsibility of the purchaser to state the gas composition. So the gas composition stated by the purchaser shall not be modified in any way by the manufacturer. This is very, very important. You see, the gas composition that you state as a purchaser here must not be modified by the manufacturer. So these are some of the things that you need to reconfirm, because you initially submitted process data sheet as a purchaser to the vendor, and they came back with the mechanical data sheet containing the information about the operating conditions that you have stated and the performance of their own equipment they're about to supply to you. So you have to check that the gas composition have not been tampered with. All right. Now, another section that you have to be on the lookout for is the installation requirements. The installation requirements, has it been properly filled? If you are the machinery engineer, has the process department have they given you the enough information regarding the location of the installation of the equipment? Is it going to be indoor? Is it going to be outdoor? Is it going to be at the grade level or on a mezzanine floor? Will it be under roof? Will it be heated or unheated? You see, these are some of the things that you need, as the machinery engineer, to clarify with your process your process guy from the purchaser side. All right, because this information must be furnished to the respective vendors. All right, so the installation requirements like the electrical area classification has to be stated. What about the site data? The site data has to be stated. The ambient temperature, the dry bulb, the wet bulb, as the case may be. Is winterization required depending on the location where the equipment will be installed? Is it a tropical region with tropicalization required? Some of this information must be stated on the equipment data sheet on API 617 centrifugal compressor data sheets. If this information is not stated, you won't be able to do a thorough, detailed engineering analysis before this equipment is supplied to your plants. Okay, so that was why I said installation requirements and ambient data shall be stated by the process. Don't forget, and it has to be checked by the machinery engineer. So if you are the machinery engineer, you need to reconfirm, you need to clarify with your process guys. Now, is there any unusual conditions such as dust or fumes? Right? Is it within a refinery atmosphere? Will it be within manufacturing atmosphere? So this information, this installation requirement must be what? Must be stated. All right? Now, other information, that another point is, you see, once a supply specification is prepared, because you must have prepared supply specification together with several documents you are going to, submit with your MR, which is the material requisition. that will be given to different vendors. So once a supply specification is prepared, it is better to refer to it for applicable project specification. So there are some information on the data sheet that will be stated as per job specification. That's another document that must have been prepared together with the material requisition required to be furnished by your shortlisted vendors. All right. Now, the shipment conditions and other information has to be what? Has to be stated. Now, what is the information about the painting? The what? Manufacturer standard? Are you following the manufacturer standard? Or it is as per your job specification stated for the vendors in the job specifications submitted, during the stage you are doing basic engineering review. All right, so these are some of the information that you look out for. Another area, another section of the API 617 centrifugal compressor data sheets that you also, as either as process the engineers or as the machinery engineer, especially from the purchaser side, is you need to be very conversant with the constructional features of the compressor you are about to purchase. What are the constructional features of the equipment? Features such as the speed. Is the speed as per what you have in API 617? What is the rated speed of this particular compressor? The vendor needs to furnish this. Now, is it what type of the compressor you're about to purchase? Is it closed? Is it open? All right. So these are constructional features that you need to be what? To be very, very familiar with and check whether this information is provided on the data sheet. So under the constructional features, you need to check the machine lateral analysis. The machine lateral analysis and the torsional analysis. It has to always, is required to be provided. You see, preliminary analysis shall be checked for compliance by the machinery engineer. So if you are the machinery engineer, you need to check the compliance of the vendor information given on the data sheet with respect to what is stated in API 617, which is the standard governing the design of that equipment. All right. So the question should now be, how do you check? So just for the purpose of today, I'm trying to let you know some of the important data that you need to be on the lookout for. Another session we are going to be having in the next few weeks will be, how do you check this information with respect to what API 617 has said? Is it in line with what you have in API 617 for the optimal performance of the equipment? And I don't want you to miss out by the time we are doing this detailed analysis. So please, if you are just joining us, click the subscribe button and share with all other engineers using various professional networks so that a lot of people can get knowledge of this information, can get knowledge of this, can be very familiar, so you can confidently take up equipment data sheets and look out for this data. Not only to look out for this data, that is one aspect. Now another aspect will now be, okay, what does API 617 says with respect to this data that this particular vendor A has submitted? Is it in line with the basic design standards? If not, then you have to give comments for the vendor to incorporate the right information. And if he fails to do that, then you move to another vendor. So by that, you can select the best equipment that will give the highest efficiency, with a reduced operational cost in the end. All right. So you look at the lateral critical speeds, you do a preliminary, check compliance of the torsional critical speeds. Now the vibration stated, is it as per API 617? So these are some of the things that you check. So during follow-up phase, the final document shall be issued by the manufacturer and it has to be reviewed for compliance. But how will you review the document if you don't know the information to look out for? So this is the area a lot of machinery engineer or rotating equipment engineer fails to be on the lookout for during the detailed engineering stage of any of a particular project. So they just rush and procure. You don't just, you have to, because compressors, either compressors or pumps or steam turbines, these are critical equipment in your plant, and any shutdown will lead to disaster in the plant, and you don't want to be the engineer responsible for frequent shutdown in the plant. So that is why it is expected of you to do a detailed analysis when you are still at the document stage. All right. So another section that you need to also be on the lookout for during by the time you receive API 617 compressor data sheet is the material section, which I call the point 11. The material section, what the material tests could be specified in detail. It has to be specified in detail, although it can be specified in other documents as inspection data sheet or supply specification. So you can check the vendor's information regarding the material. Now, like you see in this case, you have shaft. The material for the shaft is that the vendor has given you is AISI 4340. Is it in line with API 617? Now the shaft end, the side is tapered, not cylindrical. Is that what you have? Is it in line with API 617? Is it in line as per your supply specification? All right. Now you check the material for the balance piston. What is the material for this particular equipment? You have A182F22. Now, is it in line with what you have in data sheets or in your supply specification with respect to API 617? Your shaft sleeve, what material has been stated? So you need to check the compliance with some of the basic design conditions, some of the basic design criteria as far as materials are concerned. Now your labyrinth, what type of material is stated for the labyrinth? You can see here the interstage said Aviona 14. Is that what is stated or you state in the supply specification? Now, what does API 617 says as far as this material is concerned? The balance piston, what does API 617 says as far as the material is concerned? This material stated, is it acceptable with respect to what? With respect to API 617, the material section. Are you with me? Now, you look at your casing, the casing type, like you have in this case, the casing split is horizontal. What is the material? What is the casing material? A516 grade 60. Have A350 LF2. Is it in line with what API 617 says? If this information is not provided on the equipment data sheet, how do you check? So you just see a vendor supply compressor to your plant without a thorough analysis of the information, without a detailed check, without checking the compliance of the vendor with respect to what we have either in API 617 or your project specification. This is this challenge that we normally have, especially during when you find yourself in an already operational plant, because the equipment has been purchased. So either due to the failure of the machinery engineer or the process engineer to do a thorough detailed analysis at the detailed engineering stage of the project in order to get the right equipment. So these are some of the things that you need to check out for. What is the maximum working pressure? Is it stated? What is the design pressure? If it is not stated, you say please furnish. You can see furnish complete information. Will buffer gas system required? If it's going to be required, you must have indicate it has been indicated. Then what is the buffer gas type? Primary, secondary. What is the buffer gas control system? Has it been specified? If it is not specified, you need to do what? You need to comment on the data sheet and send it back to the vendor to provide the information required. The seal type, very, very important, shall be specified by the machinery engineer. The seal type has to be specified by the machinery engineer according to the type of what? Handle gas and the project requirements. You can see in this case, the type seal, what do we have? We have labyrinth tertiary seal. All right, labyrinth tertiary seal. Then you have, okay, what is the buffer gas flow? These are some of the information. Then you begin to ask questions. The self-acting dry gas seals are usually preferred, for some of the compressors that I've worked on. It's a tandem type. So the flare back pressure, normal, the maximum pressure or mechanical design pressure, as well as settle out pressure shall also be provided by the purchaser. So you need to provide this information if you're on the purchaser side. Now, same way, some other data you need to be on the lookout for when you receive equipment data sheet. Now is what are the vibration analysis, the machine protection system. The machine protection system provided. You see, machine protection systems in terms of the vibration, in terms of the temperature instrumentation, they are all regulated by what? API 670. The machine protection systems, they are regulated by API 670. You need to take note of that. The vibration, the temperature, the instrumentation, they are regulated by API 670 and supplied by manufacturer with the option of the monitors that could be provided by the purchaser in the main DCS. So these are some of the things. So you have to see what type of the machinery protection system that has been provided for the equipment. Your bearing, what type of the bearing? Okay, the bearing type could be specified by the machinery engineer according to the project's requirements. So if you are the machinery engineer, you can specify the bearing type. They should normally be of tilting pad from experience. They should normally be of what? Tilting pad. Self-equalized for thrust bearing. And of tilting pad for journal bearing. So the machinery engineer can actually state the type, the bearing type. Now in this case we have the tilting pad. So the manufacturer information must also be provided. So what is the length? What is the length? What is the shaft diameter? What is the base material? This information must now be furnished by the vendor. What is the bar bit thickness? The number of pads? The pivot center? So if this information is not provided, you have to give comments. You as a purchaser, you can just indicate Okay, the type, the bearing type, the radial, and at the same time the thrust bearing. Like I said, they are normally be of tilting pad, self-equalized for thrust bearing. So you see the active and the inactive side. Now the vendor needs to give you the information about the manufacturer of that bearing. If the information is not provided, you have to comment. You have to do what? You have to comment. Very, very important. You have to comment on the data sheet, on the equipment data sheet. You see, the problem we have seen in the industry is that thorough information, the right information, is always neglected during the detailed engineering, during the basic engineering. So if you fail at the preliminary stage of the project, at the preliminary stage of the procurement stage, to request for this basic information, you find out that by the time you put the equipment into operation and eventually there is a breakdown, then you begin to run helter-skelter. I've seen plants whereby they don't even have access to the data sheets. How do you know what type of bearing is supplied or was supplied with this equipment? So if you are making if you have to procure spares, what type of information you need as far as the bearing is concerned for replacement? So, but if the right information is provided during this preliminary stage, it makes life easier, and you can do a thorough analysis to be able to say, oh, for this vendor, has it met what API 617 states? Has it met what the API 670 states, which is the machinery protection system? By the time you get to the lubrication systems, now has it met what API 614 says? Now about the tanks, about the pumps, for the lubrications. Now the control oil systems, what does the API 617 says regarding that? The shaft sealing system, the right information, has it been provided? All right, so that's why it's very, very important for you to know. What you don't know, you cannot check. What you don't know, you cannot review. What is expected of me as a purchaser? What is expected of my vendor? So it is very, very important that the vendor has to supply you the details of the bearing type provided. Okay, so you see the bearing type, although I said can be specified by the machinery engineer, so you can say tilting pad for the active and the inactive side. All right, so they should normally be of tilting pad, like I said. Now another thing is, you can see here a lot of information regarding the machinery protection system. You see the bearing temperature devices. What type of bearing temperature devices is coming along with the equipment? Is it RTD, which is the resistant temperature detector? All right. Now this selection switch and indicator, is it by purchaser or is it by manufacturer? Now, where is the location of this bearing temperature device? The journal, is it on the journal bearing? Now, if it's going to be on the journal bearing, how many per bearing? So these are some of the things. The location, okay, for the thrust bearing, what do you have? How many do you have? You can see 3 per bearing. You can see on the inactive side, you see 2 per bearing. Who is going to supply the monitor? Is it the purchaser? Is it the vendor? So these are some of the information. Monitor supplied by who? Is it the compressor vendor? So these are some of the information that needs to be clarified on the equipment, on the what? On the equipment data sheet. So the compressor can be equipped with minimum 2 simplex thermocouples or 2 duplex RTDs. RTD is the resistant temperature detector. Can be 1 main wired and 1 spared unwired for each journal bearing. Like you can see for each journal bearing. So if a vendor is supplying one RTD, then you have to comment. Or is supplying you 2 per bearing, then you have to comment. What does API 617 says regarding the number that has to be here? The number per bearing. What does API 670 says as with respect to the machinery protection system? All right, so these are some of the information that needs to be clarified at the preliminary stage of any project, so that there won't be any what? So that there won't be any problem in the course of the operations of the plant. All right, now the axial position detector, is it as per API 670? What type of axial positioner? Is it contacting or non-contacting? Now, what is the model? You need to request for this information. This information must be furnished by the vendor. All right, what is the model of the non-contacting axial position detector the vendor is looking forward to submitting for your project? Who is the manufacturer? Like you can see here, you can see the manufacturer stated. Now, what number is required? What number is required? Is it 2? Is it 1? Now, is it in line with respect to the project specification that you have specified? Is it in line with what you have in your project specification? You see, these are some of the important information that you need to check for. Now, so if the vendor is putting 1, then you need to comment. The oscillator demodulator supply is going to supply by who? So if you have stated in the project specification that it's going to be supplied by the vendor, then the vendor, right, needs to provide information about that instrument. Who is the manufacturer? In case you need to purchase this later on your own after 5, 6, 7 years. Who is the manufacturer? All right. Now the monitor. Who is going to supply the monitor? What is the model? So these are some of the information that needs to be supplied to you as far as what? As far as the machinery protection system is concerned. And you need to be on the lookout. The vibration detectors. What type of vibration detectors? What does API 670 says? Right? As regarding the what? Regarding the vibration detectors. Are you with me? Now, what type? Is it the contacting or the non-contacting type that the vendor is looking forward to supplying to you? What is the model? What is the model? Who is the manufacturer? The number at each shaft bearing, how many? So, what did you state in the project specification? What you have here, is it as per the project specification? Because you can state 2 in your project specification during the material requisition, and the vendor is coming back with just 1. So if you don't check, how will you know? So you check the total number. If you have 2 journal bearings, then you check. Now the oscillator demodulators, who is supplying and detailed information about the location. UCP, is it unit control panel? Is it the model? What is the model? So these are some of the information that you have to be on the lookout for by the time you receive, API 617 compressor datasheet. Like I said when we just started, it is one thing to know this data. It's one thing to know what to look out for. Now, it's another thing to know, how do I check the compliance of this vendor with respect to the applicable standard governing this equipment? How to do that? It will be another section that I will cover, later in the weeks, and I will upload on the channel for you to look at. So if you are yet to subscribe, I would advise, please click the subscribe button below, and very important, press the bell button so that you can always get notification. I appreciate all our subscribers in the past month. I appreciate your feedback and I appreciate your comments. All right. So another thing that you also need to be on the lookout for when you see the equipment API 617 compressor data sheet is the process line connection. Now, like you can see here, the inlet casing connections have been specified. The discharge for each stage has been specified. All right. So you must have your process line connections. Your process line connections. You must have your what? Your process line connections stated. Okay? You must have your process line connection stated just like you have here. What is the size? What is the facing? What is the position? Is it flanged or studded? Gasket will be supplied by who? By vendor? Yes or no? It has to be stated. All right? So these are some of the things that you need to do to be on the lookout for. So the process line connection, the type, the size shall be stated by what? By the process department. This is very, very important. It has to be stated by what? By the process department. What is the inlet size? 46 inch, 34 inch discharge for the first stage. Now, for the second stage, you have 14 inch for the second inlet and 12 inch size for the second discharge. You have to state what is the rating. 300 ratings. Now, the facing, the raised face, you have to state this information on the data sheet. So the vendor will be familiar, will know. So as a machinery engineer, if the process department fails to supply you with this information, you need to request for this information. Now, what is the position? What is the position? Is it downward? Is it upward? Is it sideways? Now, is it flanged or studded? So this section of the equipment data sheet, you have to state this information to be able to do a thorough what? A thorough analysis. To be able to do what? A thorough analysis. Now, another very important thing is the drains, the drain connections. Have you supplied me with the proper drains information? Now, you said individual stage drains required. I need to state this. Drains shall be normally required, valved and manifolded to a single blinded flange joint. So is that what you have here? You have the individual stage drains required. Now you can see the section marked black means that you have individual stage drains required and it is valved, blinded and manifolded. If this information is not provided, you have to, either as a machinery engineer, you have to request for this information. All right. Now, you also need to, there are other informations like, so the vendor is telling you, refer to P&ID documents. So you need information about other connections such as the lube oil inlet, lube oil outlet, the seal oil inlet and outlet, the seal gas inlet and outlet, the casing drains, the stage drains. So he has referred you to the P&ID of this equipment. So you have to check the P&ID for this information. Now you see information about reliable piping forces, right? For you to do a thorough stress analysis. So you see reliable piping forces and moment. So the vendor said you refer to general arrangement and mechanical purchaser connection drawing, which must have been furnished to you. So if you need this information, there are some informations that the vendor might not state on the equipment data sheet. So he will have to refer you either to the general arrangement drawing or to the what? Or to the piping and instrumentation diagrams. So you need to also go and check, is this information provided? If it is not provided, either you give comment on the P&ID or you do what? Or you give comments on the equipment data sheet and state, please furnish. Because by the time you have to do a thorough technical evaluation, you need this information. Without this information, you cannot do a detailed engineering analysis of this equipment. Now, another sections that you need to also be very familiar with is other accessories like couplings. Now, the couplings stated, the coupling and guards has to be as per API 671. The coupling and coupling guard to be always required non-sparking type. So what type of couplings are they supplying you, right? In accordance with API 671, the couplings has to be usually dry, it has to be flexible and all metal. Is that what you have here? Now you see attached API 671 data sheet. See coupling, who is going to furnish the coupling? The compressor vendor. Now what type? The question is, what type of coupling is the vendor supplying the equipment with? Is it diaphragm? Is it SS flexible membrane? If this information is not supplied, then you have to do what? You have to comment on the equipment data sheet. Please furnish as requested. Now, what type of the coupling and coupling guard? Is it the fully enclosed? Is it the semi-open or the non-sparking? Like I said, the coupling and coupling guard as per what? As per API 671, has to always be non-sparking type. So if it is non-sparking, if non-sparking is not specified, you have to please check. Now the coupling details. Vendor mount half coupling. Is it non-loop? Is it grease? Is it continuous oil loop or what? So this and other information must be provided on what? On the equipment data sheet. So failure to provide this, you need to do what? You need to request for the information. Now, another very important section that you need to also be on the lookout for, when you receive the equipment data sheet as a machinery engineer, is the mounting plates, the base plates. Who is going to furnish it? Is it the compressor vendor or you as a purchaser? So that must have been specified in your supply specification or project specification. And the vendor must state it on the equipment data sheet. Like you have here, the base plates furnished by compressor vendor. So you know. Now, is it only for compressor? Are you having separate base plate for compressor and the driver or the gear? Now you can see here you have other common base plates for compressor and driver. So you know that the base plate is going to be common for both the compressor and what? And the driver. The drip rim, the leveling pads. You see, the perimeter, is it stated? If there's going to be sole plates, have you stated the necessary information? The stainless steel chim, what is the thickness required? The primer for epoxy grout required, will it be required, yes or no? So if it is not required, you say, like you say, no epoxy grout required by vendor review. Now, where will your base plate be? The base plate, will it be on concrete foundation? These are some of the information that you need to clarify as a machinery engineer with the process department. Will there be machine mounting pads required? It's going to be required. You give comments on the equipment data sheet. So it's a joint responsibility of both the purchaser, and from the purchaser side, of course, you have the machinery engineer, which may be mechanical engineer or the rotating equipment engineer, and at the same time you have the process department or the chemical engineers. So you need is a joint effort to ensure that the right information is provided on the data sheet to make life easy, to make life easier for the machinery engineer that will be doing what? A thorough analysis of that data sheet, that will be doing a thorough technical evaluation of that equipment data sheet. Now the next question will now be the available utility conditions. Available utility. Now, before I go to available utility, you need to state, normally a steel base plate has to be required, eventually common with driver and gearbox for API 617 compressor. Requirement for a column mounting gives higher base plate stiffness. So now for the utility conditions, you need to specify as the purchaser what are the available utility conditions in your site. There's going to be, if the driver will require steam, what are the inlet steam conditions? So available utility should be stated by purchaser at the compressor battery limit. All right, at the compressor what? At the compressor battery limit. So it has to be stated. What are the exhaust utility conditions? Are you with me? If you are with me, just drop you are with me. Okay, so these are some of the informations that you need to be what? To be on the lookout for. Now the cooling water requirements, your inlet temperature, your normal pressure, the instrument air, if the instrument air will be required. So what are the conditions? What are the utility conditions in your plant? So you can see here at the utility sections, you have refer to utility consumption list and electric load list. So these are the information that must be provided. So the utility conditions must be provided. The available utility conditions in the site should be stated by what? By the purchaser. And lest I forget, the compressor battery limits. It has to be what? At the compressor battery limit. What is the inlet steam? What is the exhaust steam condition? What is the inlet cooling water temperature at the compressor battery limit? What is the cooling water inlet pressure at the compressor battery limit? What is the maximum pressure for the instrument air? What is the minimum pressure? All right, for the instrument air. So sometimes this information might not, they might refer you, you might refer the vendor to the utility list that you have provided. But whether you have it on the data sheet or you don't have it on the data sheet, it has to be provided to the vendor. So it has to be made available to the vendor, either on the equipment data sheet or in your utility list provided and submitted to what? To the vendor. So these are some of the things that you need to be on the lookout for. You can see information about the weight, your compressor weight, your gear weight, your driver weight, so that during equipment handling, you can know, okay, the type of crane that you need for the installation. All right, so you need to know the weight. So you can see, refer to machinery foundation loads and notes. So the vendor has referred you to this equipment. So you have to go and check that equipment to see whether the information has been provided or not. So if the information is not provided, you have to give a comment. You have to give your comment on the equipment data sheet. You've seen cases whereby the equipment will be supplied and you don't have information about the weight of the equipment. So how do you do the installation of the compressor? How do you do the installation of the steam turbine? And sometimes the only documents available with you at that point in time is the equipment data sheet. And you check the equipment data sheet, the weight of the compressor trains is not stated on the data sheet. So what do you do? So that is why it is very important for you to state that the vendor should furnish the required information as required as per various standards governing the basic designs of that particular equipment. Okay? Now, same way, what are the tests? What are the various inspections? So the tests and inspections shall be in compliance with API 617 and maybe your project specification. So the complete and detailed set of inspection and tests could be done on a dedicated inspection data sheet. There can be another inspection data sheet where you will see a list of various inspections required. Either it has to be witnessed by vendor's representative or just observation. So you have to indicate shop inspection, hydrostatic inspection. All these are required inspection and test as per what? As per API what? API 617, which is the design standards governing the design of this equipment, the centrifugal compressor. So if the vendor is telling you hydrostatic or shop inspection is not required, but what does API 617 says? All right? Or what does your project specification says? Are you with me? So the vendor has to meet these conditions. So if it's going to be witnessed, you say hydrostatic witness, mechanical run test, MRT. Is it contract coupling or contract probe? You have to indicate. So witness or observed, you have to indicate. A performance test, the gas leak test, discharge pressure, as required, it must be stated. And if it's not required, you leave it blank. But you also need to be familiar. What does API 617 says regarding that test? So these are some of the important data you need to be on the lookout for by the time you receive API 617 compressor data sheet. Without this information, without this data, you cannot do a thorough analysis. You cannot do a thorough technical evaluation for you to determine the technical acceptability of the vendor's bids. So you need enough data, and not just for the technical evaluations. By the time the equipment is put to use after 10 years, after 7 years, and you need to procure these spares or one or two components, you can always refer to the data sheet of the original equipment to get a matching component with that equipment. So these are some of the things that you need to do to be able, you need to familiarize yourself with. And not only that, you now need to check what does API 617 says as regards to this information. So now I've covered the whole of, so basically these are the different sections of the equipment data sheet as far as centrifugal compressor, API 617 compressor is concerned. So we have looked at different sections that you will need to be on the lookout for the right data to be provided for you to do what? A thorough technical evaluation of that particular vendor. But if this information is not provided, the necessary data, you won't have the necessary data to do a thorough technical bid analysis in order to determine, which vendor am I to finally go with. What is the shaft BKW? All right. So this is going to be the end of this particular session. On the channel, just like I've said, there is another section that I'm going to upload on the channel, which will talk about how to carry out a thorough technical evaluation. Now, today, what you have just learned is some of the data that you need to be on the lookout for. Another area, another skill that you need to also have as a machinery engineer is how do you now do a thorough technical evaluation? How do you interpret some of the design criteria as stated in API 617 with respect to the data in front of you? Of what use is the data if you cannot interpret the data? If you cannot apply the data with respect to what API 617 or API 614 for the lubrication system as stated. So this is a skill that you also need to be on the lookout for, especially if you are looking out towards being on the design and engineering area. All right. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to be uploading, different sections on how to check this, on how to do a thorough calculations. I've done for compressor series. I've done for centrifugal pump series. Then I'll be doing for centrifugal compressor series before we move to steam turbines. So I want to cover rotating equipment for some time before we finally go to static equipment. So it has been a great pleasure for me to share what I know as far as this equipment is concerned, as far as detailed engineering is concerned. So thank you. I really appreciate your time for today, for joining me on this channel. So if this is the first time you are coming across the channel and you are yet to subscribe, so please do well by clicking the subscribe button below and press the bell button so that you can get notification. And very importantly, I need to mention this. I'm going to be on live on this channel for 3 good days on centrifugal pumps. We are going to be talking about centrifugal pumps, from design perspective, from detail engineering perspective. We are going to be doing complete calculations, complete technical analysis, from 18, 19, 20 on this channel. So, but there is a registration requirement for that. So you can check through my channel. I'm going to put the link for the registration because it's not going to be made public like this. So you can check. I'm going to put the registration link below the description of this session. So you can always, before on the 8th, so register, because the training session on that centrifugal pump, I bet you it's going to be one of the trainings, one of the best trainings you have witnessed or you have participated in as far as pumps are concerned. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time for today. God bless you. Bye.